Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the July 10th work and business session of the Cabarrus County Board of Education. I'd like to welcome our new Teacher of the Year, Ms. Carrie Fugel, to our meeting. This is her first official board meeting. Also like to welcome board members Sam Treadaway, Keisha Sandage, Tim Furr, our superintendent, Dr. John Kopicki, our vice chair, Mr. Rob Walter, our board members, Ms. Laura Lindsay, Ms. Pam Escobar, our board attorney, Gil Middlebrooks, and our board clerk, Christy Williams. Thank you. Board will move to 1.01 and we'll call this meeting to order. We'll move to 2.01, board members, and we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Board, we will move to 3.01 where we will adopt the agenda. I need a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. So moved. I have a motion. I need a second.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Lindsay, a second by Mr. Walter. All those in favor of adopting the agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes. Thank you, board members. We will move to 4.01, our board chair comments. Board, I wanted to let you know that Dr. Kopicki and I had a meeting prior to coming in here tonight, and we will need to meet next Monday, the 17th, for a special called meeting, and it will be for personnel and maybe one or two additional items. Just want to make sure you guys are in agreement about that.
Same time, same location?
Yes. Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move to 4.02 and our superintendent comments with Dr. John Kopicki. Welcome, Dr. Kopicki.
Thank you, Mrs. Adcock. Just a couple of brief announcements to update our community on some of the happenings in the district over the summer. Hard to believe, but I want to take a moment to wish good luck to the Wolf Meadow Elementary students on a successful school year as they begin next Tuesday on July 18th. That will officially kick off our school year for the 23-24 year here in Cabarrus County Schools. I see Mr. Doolin here this evening, so welcome, Mr. Doolin, the principal of the Wolf Meadow School. And again, this will mark the beginning of Wolf Meadow's 50th year serving students in our community. And they will also host their open house for students and parents Thursday, July 13th from 4:30 to 6:30, which is this Thursday. So they'll have their open house this Thursday. And we welcome all of them back and look forward to that open house this week. So, Mr. Doolin, all the best, and you kick off the year, so there's no pressure. Make it a great one. All right. And then on that note, the open houses for our middle and high school students will be held on Monday, August 7th, and the elementary school open houses will be held on Tuesday, August 8th. And if you have any questions, please call us or call your sending school. Or you can check our district website and you can look there at the back to school page and you can see under the news and noteworthy sections details about those. And in terms of communication and listening to some of the feedback from our community, under Phil Furr's direction, we've redone redone is a horrible word to say. I'm trying to think of the right word. We've revised, reconstructed. Thank you, appreciate it. That's a board superintendent working together. Thank you. We've kind of revised and reconstructed our web page under Phil's leadership, and we now have Parent Square in place. So our Cabarrus County Schools is going to begin using the Parent Square as our primary mass messaging system for the district event and news. Parents will soon or may already have received an email invitation to activate your Parent Square account. Parent Square has many modern features, including automatic translations, which will allow us to improve the way we communicate with our parents and also to communicate the events that are out there and the happenings across the district. And Parent Square automatically syncs contact information from PowerSchool for each child. So we're asking everyone to make sure as we get set to begin a new school year that you can continue to look for information in that particular email that will get you signed up on Parent Square. And if you have any problems, please contact your school's data manager with an address, email, or phone number changes so that we can have the accurate information for all of our parents and students. Our CTE and Intervex camps are going to continue over the next couple weeks, and these camps are taking place in our district. We ask you to look at our community drop-down tab for any information you would like if you want to enroll in those camps or join in those camps. They continue as we move forward throughout the summer. And then enrollment, our kindergarten enrollment continues for the upcoming school year. Again, our website has an enrollment page on there for all the information for kindergarten registration. We encourage you to use those home pages to begin your enrollment process. And if you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out to the school or the school principal of your child's school. And then lastly, I'd like to welcome 2 new members to our staff who I see here this evening. Ms. Tracy Hayes joins our curriculum and instruction department, and we're very happy to have her and bring her expertise on board to our C&I department. Tracy, welcome, and we look forward to working with you and the excellence that you'll bring to our school system. And also Mr. Cortland Reeves, who has joined our Human Resources Department, and he's now our Director of Human Resources as we transition to that leadership with Michael Williams and Mr. Cortland Reeves. So we welcome you here as well tonight and appreciate that. And also I want to thank Kim Aldridge for her, again, stepping up and assuming the leadership and the transition of our finance department. Kim is here representing the finance department and will be steering that ship in the direction it needs to go for the next couple of weeks until Philip Penn starts July 31st. So Kim, I appreciate your help and welcome, and thank you for that, your leadership this evening. And that's all.
Thank you. We'll move to 4.03 and our board attorney comments with Mr. Gil Middlebrooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Last week, the General Assembly was out of session for the July 4th holiday, but that doesn't mean that there was anything not happening, I guess the way to put it. Governor Cooper vetoed the SB 49, which is known as the Parents' Bill of Rights, on July 5th. So now that the General Assembly is back in session, that will go to the Senate and the House to see if they decide to override his veto. Another bill became law with Governor Cooper's signature last week or recently, House Bill 605, which is the School Threat Assessment Teams bill. That process has been voluntary to a certain extent. It had some funding tied to it, but now it's going to become mandatory for all schools systems in the state. And there are some additional requirements about student peer-to-peer support and things like that. It directs the Center for Safe Schools to help school districts manage that process. So we will be getting some support from that institution as time goes forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We'll move to 5.01 in committee reports. Board members, are there any reports to give tonight? Okay, thank you. We'll move to 5.02. And we will have Dr. Marion Bish and Dr. Michael Williams to the podium. Welcome.
Good evening. So as promised, I have an update for you tonight on our current staffing situation for the 23-24 school year in regard to teaching and licensed staff, so folks that are certified staff working in our buildings. 7 of our schools are currently fully hired as of this morning. 11 schools have 1 open position, and 71% of the schools, 32 of the 44, have less than 5 openings at this point. So we are, while we have some, I'll give you the whole numbers, I wanted to contextualize it with that a significant number of our schools are either fully staffed or are approaching fully staffed with licensed positions. Overall, what the numbers look like are 44.5 elementary positions that are open, spread across 21 schools. But it's important to know that only 1 elementary school has more than 3 openings. As of this afternoon, that 44.5, which was the 8 a.m. number, is down to 38.5. So we hired 6 today. So they are moving along in elementary school. What Dr. Bish and I are also noticing is that all of our hiring sheets that come through have 4 or 5 candidates that have been interviewed. So you can kind of see it when it gets to be a pinch. You'll be down where they had 3 candidates or 2 candidates. We are still sitting at 4 or 5 candidates for those positions. So 44.5 elementary positions. There are 24 open middle school positions, but it's important to note that 7 of the 9 middle schools have less than 3 openings. And there are 38 high school positions, 13 of which are career technical education positions. They're a little harder to hire. They're very specialized, and so we're continuing to work with the CTE department to recruit there. 7 of the 9 high schools have less than 3 openings. So we are working very carefully there. We're providing strategic support to several schools who have a disproportionate number of vacancies to do some recruiting and some help with staffing there. And Mr. Reeves and I are checking in with those principals, with all of our principals daily, but particularly in places where we want to make sure that they're as close to fully staffed as they can be to begin the school year. On the student support side, we're interviewing for 6.5 counselor positions and 1 school social worker. That's what's still open in student support. EC obviously is a difficult area. That talent pool is certainly more shallow, and our universities simply are not graduating a lot of folks out of those EC departments. At present, we have 26.5 open EC positions, 16 of which are at the elementary level. We are working with the EC department to recruit both traditionally, right, our traditional methods of recruiting, and we're working with the EC department to explore some partnerships with staffing agencies that work specifically with EC positions, particularly around our centralized classrooms that follow the adapted curriculum. So I will have an update for you on that as we move forward. Those partnership discussions are ongoing. At the school level, there are 97 classified positions. That includes clerical, teacher assistants, and custodial. Of the 97, 60 are teacher assistant positions across the district. And then transportation department, we're continuing to recruit bus drivers. We had a push out today and had an email blast today with probably 8 or 10 folks that emailed back saying they were interested, and so we're continuing pretty well weekly to reach out to folks that have applied. Nancy Hunter over in the HR specialist in the transportation department does a wonderful job responding. As soon as she gets an applicant, she is on it. She was back and forth with me all day today, making sure that she followed up on the folks that emailed us back. In that regard, we have 51 bus driver openings, but we have 20 candidates in processing. Now, I cannot tell you all 20 of those will make their way all the way through. As we've explained, that's a very complicated process that involves the DMV, but there are 20 candidates moving through the pipeline as we speak. In addition, in transportation, there are 5 transportation safety assistant positions, 1 mechanic, and 5 van driver positions that are still open. We did, in our blast today, also push out information about the van drivers. Mr. Reeves and I met Friday and today. He is working with the transportation department along with Child Nutrition, Kids Plus, and Facilities to schedule an open interview day that will be coming sometime in the next week or 2, and we will again push that out and help to market and manage that event as we work our interviews and try to get candidates into those bus driver positions. I'll also close by telling you that I will include a vacancy update in next week's board report. So I will begin to get this in so that you're getting that weekly in the board report. That is what I have for you this evening, and I'll answer any questions you might have.
Board members, any discussion, any questions? Ms. Lindsay?
I was just wondering where we are with the payroll study that we were working on and doing. I'm just hoping maybe we'll have some info on that.
Yeah, so I see it wrapping up in with at least first phase of it wrapping up in the next week or so. As we got the pay study back, it involved doing an audit of our current employees to make sure that folks were placed on the pay scale in the where they were supposed to be placed, and so we've done an audit. We can't bring a final we can't bring a recommendation with a final budget impact cost until we get that audit finished. Our folks in HR, the wonderful folks that work in there, have done an unbelievable job of taking that on in addition to the work that they're doing to get hiring finished. And when Marion and I looked at it today, we're within just a handful of folks of having that first piece of the audit done. So I'll have an update for you. I believe the first board meeting in August, I'll be able to give you an update, and I certainly will. We're getting really close to me being able to bring something to you.
Thank you.
Mr. Walter?
Yeah, Michael, thank you for the information. That's Good to know. How do we handle it when we have a principal vacancy? Are we still hiring at that school, or who's taking over that until you get a new?
So Dr. Bish and I are working collaboratively on that, and we will be interviewing for our open principal positions this week.
Thank you.
Tomorrow, those interviews start tomorrow. Right now, Weddington Hills Elementary, Hickory Ridge Elementary School, Concord Middle School, and C.C. Griffin Middle School are the current positions that we're opening for, and there is potential for other openings as well as we shift possible positions over the next week or two, pending final evaluations. Those positions right now are still maintained by the current principals, as there's a 60-day rule that I shouldn't say rule, there's a 60-day period in place. We have to stay in place contractually until we can let them go. So we will hold everyone in place until we can fill those positions. I say that also cautioning the board and our public to understand that even under that 60-day hire, stay in place until they can leave. We also are going to have to understand if we hire people outside of the district that they too may have a 60-day stay put where they are, so the transition coming in may be an overlap. But our human resource department has been very good at putting interims in place if need be. But we will keep the board and our publics up to date on that as we move forward.
Ms. Sandin.
Sorry. So I probably ask this every time, but clearly maybe the message is not getting to folks. So how does one, if they are applying for a position, what is the best way to get in contact with HR? What is the best way to apply for that position? Because I get emails asking for me to link somebody to the right person.
Sure. So they would, a couple of things. They obviously need to complete the application. That flags for the hiring manager to review the application. I encourage folks when they reach out to me they should email directly to the person. If they're applying at a school, email the principal and let them know, but they have to have that application in when they send the email, because the principal's going to immediately go to the application. And they certainly can reach out to Mr. Reeves and I, and we can make connections. We do that quite a bit, so they can send an email directly to me or to Cortland Reeves, and we can make the connection with them to the hiring supervisor.
The other question I had is, how likely are we to get these positions filled by the time school starts? And I know that's the $1 million question,
it is the $1 million question.
Will we know, or will you present to the board again to let us know where we are in specific positions, like as detailed as this, because this was good stuff?
I will. So I'll start including an update like this in your board report, and then we'll certainly be back at your request to be able to provide these updates. Mr. Reeves and I will be monitoring at the schools as we go through. Again, there are candidates out there. The places where I would say we're going to have a little more difficult time are exactly where you would think they would be. So math, secondary math and science, and EC. And so we are having to be creative, but Angie McLean, who is our lead recruiter, is doing an unbelievable job right now. I've been watching emails through the day. She's watching applicants as they come in, and she's routing those applicants via email directly to the principals and saying, hey, here are 2 math candidates that applied today. That way the principals can immediately reach out to them.
And last question, I know this is probably like a loose question, but do you have what you need in HR to be able to get folks on board here at Cabarrus County? Like, is there something else that you need specifically from?
Nothing specifically. We're doing some system work around the actual hiring systems that we use that will certainly, over the next 12 months, will improve the efficiency of the process. But we've got a wonderful team in human resources right now, and they are moving. Again, we hired just in elementary today. I only counted elementary. That didn't include anything else that got processed. But we hired 6 elementary school teachers and got them finished just through the day today. And those folks are there doing a great job moving them along for Cortland and Marion and I to be able to sign and get them finalized.
Thanks for the information.
Certainly.
Dr. Williams, if you would, you mentioned it, but please could you, beginning this week, include that in the weekly report so the board sees the updates on that. Absolutely. And then they'll have that at their fingertips. They can go back week to week and see how the progress is being made.
Yeah, Ms. Gentry is pulling all of that for you weekly, and we will begin dropping that in a very a table format that is the same every week, so you guys can see where we are.
Perfect, thank you.
I'm sorry, I do have one more question. Okay, so you guys have identified the schools that truly need support. How do you identify, like, what does that look like? Do they have, like, missing 7 staff, or do they tell you that? Like, how does that happen?
We're watching that, so I'm pulling those numbers. Paige Gentry pulls those numbers for me each day, and so I am watching to see where those locations are, and then I'm sending. Angie has taken some, Cortland has taken some, I have taken some, and we're reaching out and working with those principals individually to see what type of support they might need. In a great example, Cortland checked in with one of our principals today, and he said, "No, I've got it done. I had a week of vacation. I've got them lined up. I'm doing references. I'm going to submit 8 of them this week." Right? So I don't feel like I think our principals are doing an unbelievably good job of hiring and moving them along. And so our job is just to watch the numbers and then check in to make sure that they're continuing to move.
Mr. Treadaway.
Thank you for the report, Dr. Williams. The thing I found disconcerting is it sounds like the EC pipeline is not what it could be.
It is. It is.
I mean, which is not a Cabarrus County issue, but but it's a special needs student issue everywhere. And am I hearing it right?
You are. So one of the things that is that we've done, and again, I've been very proud of Angie McLean. Like I get to, I'm blessed to be able to work with wonderful folks who do great things. So we have quite a few folks that are in that TA to teacher pipeline that we discussed with you through Western Governors University. There are 30 plus teachers in that right now, and for many of them, the degree is elementary/EC, which is going to, we're not quite there yet, but we've got a pathway where 12 months from now it's going to.
And that's a natural fit.
What's that?
That's a natural fit.
That's a natural fit, and these are all people who are TAs already working in our district.
Ms. Escobar.
Thank you for the update. I appreciate hearing the numbers, but then also having context, because that's helpful. I'm concerned about the TAs because they're the ones that step up, especially in those EC classrooms. So if we need to hire them, that's something that I'm concerned about. And getting to it, piggybacking on Keisha's question, which is, do you have what you need? Meaning, as far as marketing is concerned, do we need to be putting more money into that to help you? I'm not saying that you guys aren't working hard. I'm just saying that could you use a little help in spreading the message, or even grassroots on the ground? I mean, Angie's one person, but I know she's amazing, and because she's a teacher, she's very good at telling people what the job is. But do we need other people to help you?
Yeah, so it certainly, as to you guys and to the viewing audience tonight, like a lot of it comes with word of mouth, right? Like Cabarrus County is a great place to work. We're continuing to push out to folks who are interested. Hiring in education looks a little different than hiring in other fields, right? There's some overlaps, but it also is kind of TAs are a niche. It's a niche profession, right? And so some of it is getting to the folks who are interested. I feel like we're making some ground around the teacher assistants. I know the number of 60 is high. What I will tell you is we're also signing those sheets. That was an 8 a.m. number. I imagine that number is lower today. I don't imagine. I know for a fact that number is lower. I watched them come through today. So the principals, again, are making progress on that. It's difficult for me to speak to, like, do we need more resources? Like, that's a hard question to answer when we're in the midst of, we're gonna plug along and do what we do to make sure that our children have the right folks in front of them to start the school year.
Well, yeah, and I think that it would be helpful after this hiring season for maybe us to do, a debrief afterwards and look back and see where we could have, what holes existed, what was great, that's what you did before with Puerto Rico and like all these other places that you're going to find people, but keep that in mind.
Absolutely,
and then
appreciate it very much.
And in the report too, so I appreciated the bus driver information. Fingers crossed 20 people make it across that finish line. But if you could also give us those numbers in relation to the teacher assistants, so how many are in the pipeline? I understand it takes time to process, but if we have just some clue of where that is. And then could you also add assistant principals?
Yep,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
Any other questions, Ms. Sandage?
So did we hire 9 bus drivers? The last number I heard was 60. Because if we did, I wanted to celebrate that.
That number is dropping, and we did hire quite a few this past week.
Well, congratulations.
Not to me. We'll hand that to our folks who did that hiring.
Okay, thank you so much for the report.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, board, we'll move to our presentations in 6.01, and we'll have Ms. Joanna Parker for elementary discipline data. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, members of the board, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, Dr. Kopicki. We are excited to be here tonight to go through elementary discipline information. I know secondary was in May, a few months ago, a bit ago. So some of these slides are similar, just so that you know that there is consistency across. So some of those sections I may go a little more quickly and then stop in sections that are more specific to elementary. And then I have with me today Ms. Baker, the principal at Cox Mill Elementary, and Mr. Doolin, principal at Wolf Meadow Elementary, that starts next week. There we go. All right, so a big area that I know secondary talked about quite a bit was Educator's Handbook. So just so everybody knows, this was the first year that K-12 will use the same discipline tracking system across the board. So as we're going through and talking about numbers, you may ask, like, what was the comparison to the year before? I don't have that because this is baseline data for this year, if that makes sense. So a lot of what we're using this year is really helping us with planning going into next year. And these wonderful people standing next to me are going to talk about exactly what they're doing at their respective schools going into next year. All right, so that's Educator's Handbook. Just language going through as a reminder. Minor incidents are MIRs, minor incident referrals. Those are discipline that teachers assign. So teachers put in an assign. And then ODRs are majors. We call them minors and majors. Major referrals, which are things that are reportable offenses. Some of them are reportable offenses, and that is where administrators assign that discipline. So just a reminder there with language. All right, so data digs. So this year was the first year that using discipline data was a part of looking at academic data. And elementary schools, honestly, we look at data a lot. We, this past year, had 5 different times when teams from all 22 elementary schools came in and looked at academic and behavioral data. So each of those times, it was not just a focus on academics, but then also looking at discipline. And this past school year was the first time that we did that. A big area that we talked about are identifying the root cause. So when we talk about, is looking at the root cause. So grade level, location, time of day, day of the week, and we taught administrators to do a root cause analysis. So like when you go to the doctor and they ask you what are your symptoms, and you tell them they want to figure out what's actually wrong, it's the same thing with a student. A student, when they're acting out, there's a reason. There's something going on that usually is not just that thing. So in elementary world, from our 5-year-olds in kindergarten up to our big kids in 5th grade, we are really focused on being proactive and not being reactive. So a lot of what you're going to hear us talk about is teaching, because anytime that staff is administering discipline, that's a teaching moment. So all of this really focuses on MTSS, so multi-tiered systems of support, and that flows right into Destination 2025, being a champion for all students, expecting excellence, carrying the banner, being a merchant of hope, the Jimmy Casas work that we've all looked at. You've all seen this many times before, so I'm going to keep it moving. But a reason that we zoned in on looking at data digs last fall was when we looked at our FAMS and FAMD, so the district FAMD in MTSS, we noticed that an area that we needed to work on was making and systematizing looking at discipline data, because we don't want to assume that schools are looking at it. We want to have a procedure and a protocol to ensure that that's always happening and that we can then support if there is an issue. Do you have a question?
Did I miss what FAMD means?
FAMD is the district rubric that the state uses to look at MTSS. So to see how we're doing. It's like a report card.
Can you tell us the acronym?
I can't off the top of my head right now, which is bad.
I'm
I should
sorry.
be able to tell you that. No, you're good.
Facilitated assessment of MTSS, FAM, and then the D is at the district level.
Thank you, Dr. Roth. All right, so looking at discipline data as a part of Data Dig Days, this was the first time we did that, and it was incredibly important going into the year, and then schools replicated that process at school. So we bring together a small school team at the district, then that team would go to schools and look at that data. All right, so this is just an example of the root cause and information that we shared with principals, and the reason why it's important to try to figure out the root cause and not just make an assumption or just punish, especially with K-5 friends, because every moment with them is a learning moment. I'm going to keep moving. All right, so consistency. All schools follow the Parent Information and Student Code of Conduct. You all know that, but that's the same in K-5. Administrative services personnel are also available to respond to administrators. So myself, Dr. Sandy Ward, Becky DeQuilla, we all are available to respond to administrators as they're looking to administer discipline, because as you can imagine, in elementary land, it's a whole lot different administering discipline to a kindergartner versus a 5th grader, and what's going to be appropriate and what makes the most sense, because they're nodding next to me. And then we also used monthly principals meetings to focus on discipline. So with onboarding new administrators and making sure that everybody's on the same page, using scenarios so that our more experienced administrators can share information with our newer administrators. All right, so here's the data. So the percentage of discipline versus offense type, so I'm going to use percentages just to go through these. So these are minor incidents. So these are in smaller things in the classroom. This could be, I read one earlier today of somebody hugged somebody too hard. So it could be something very small, somebody pushes somebody, somebody takes somebody's pencil. Those are areas that could be under each area. There's disruptive behavior at 26%, aggressive behavior at 17%, and inappropriate behavior at 16%. And then minor incident actions, so what the teacher or administrator did from whatever that behavior was. There's a lot of conference, so conference is at 23%, a lot of talking about it, what happened, explaining what will happen next time if we don't change our behavior moving forward. A student oral warning, so giving them a warning. Other, so in other, a caveat is many schools have different reflection sheets or things that they'll have students do, and because we have a district license for Educator's Handbook, we can't put in each school's individual action, if that makes sense. So other is a lot of reflection sheets, just so you know. And then timeout or reset. Sometimes we just need a break. Sometimes we're really frustrated by not knowing or understanding a math problem and we need a minute, and so I go with the counselor and take a walk around, or an administrator's walking by and so-and-so needs a break. That is also captured here. All right, then elementary school data, so this is major incidents, so things that are a bit more serious. Aggressive behavior is 39% of this information, and then disruptive behavior is at 12%, and inappropriate behavior is at 10%. And I'm going to go a little bit more when we get to grade level into specific numbers, because I'm betting you probably want to know that. All right, then major incident actions, so what happens. And how this looks at each school is a little bit different, just so you know. So in school suspension, many schools have a restart room or a ready bodies room. We use a lot of different language, but it's basically a time when they need to be in a different environment to take a minute and reset. That's not always the whole day. Sometimes it's half the day. Sometimes it's just for part of their specials or elective time. An administrative conference with a student, going and meeting with the assistant principal or principal, walking through. There's lots of reflection sheets during that time as well to reflect on what we're going to do and change down the road. OSS, sometimes unfortunately that is the next thing that has to occur. So 15% of incidents resulted in OSS, and then lunch detention, which can look a lot of different ways. That could be having a silent lunch, that could be having lunch with an admin, having lunch with a counselor, just a separate from the social setting. All right, then major incidents comparisons. So if you look at the percentages here for where they were within the year, 40% is an aggressive, and I already said that a little while ago, but I wanted you to see kind of where bus, insubordination, and then what people may deem as fighting in elementary school is very low. So these numbers are all very low, which is what we want. All right, then major offenses. This is by grade level. So this is a little interesting. So our highest offenses are in 5th grade. That's not exceptionally uncommon. But you'll notice the second highest is kindergarten. So coming out of the pandemic, and this is not using the pandemic or the stay-at-home order, learning at home as an excuse, but many students coming in and learning to be in a group of 16 people and function and be in a classroom, it's a lot. So we had to do a lot of pre-teaching with our kindergartners, and a lot of our students and staff would tell you that, or a lot of our staff would tell you that the kindergartners this past year, it was different than what a lot of our staff have worked with before. And many of them, it could be because they didn't attend a formal preschool like they had in the past, and so that was different. So we kind of had to roll back and really teach expectations throughout the year. So that's just interesting data moment. We noticed that at the beginning of the school year last year when we were looking at this data. And then when they get to speaking about schools, they're going to talk about what specific things they did in reaction to that data. And then 4th grade, 1st grade, 3rd, and 2nd. All right, so numbers. So as of the second to last day of school, we had 15,265 students in kindergarten to 5th grade in Cabarrus County Schools, and there were 2,343 major referrals in that time. That is 15% of the student body. So what I want everybody to see and understand is this is not every student. A majority of our students have no minor referrals, have no major referrals. When we look at 5th grade, even in comparison with the sizes of the groups, because every year, you never know. One year there could be a really large year in kindergarten, and the next year it's a smaller year. This just kind of shows you the breakdown throughout the year. So even in 5th grade, though they were the highest of those 2,000, still less than 25% of them had a major incident last school year. All right, what does it tell us? We have to be proactive rather than reactive. The Positivity Project has been an amazing value add to Cabarrus County Schools. We are proactively teaching students character traits and skills that we want them to know and understand. Walking in and seeing the Positivity Project last August when I transitioned to Cabarrus County, I was like, this is so amazing that we are so ahead of the game with teaching character, and we're not asking teachers to plan this. It's already right there and ready to go, and it's so good and grade appropriate. The MTSS and Behavior Intervention Support System, so every school uses PBIS. That is a non-negotiable across elementary schools in Cabarrus County. Both of these wonderful people are going to talk about that in just a minute. We use restorative practices. Some schools do this more than others. This is an area that we're going to work even more on with professional development within the coming year. And then using innovative ways to work with students, knowing kiddos, knowing what makes them tick, what with certain friends, what things do they need to ensure that they're going to have the greatest possible educational experience and get through the day. Because when kids come in, we don't know what happened that morning. And sometimes we come in, we can tell they're off, and administrator is going to take them for a minute, talk to them, figure out what's going on, what do we need to do, take them back, re-entry, keep it moving with the day. We are also doing a core focus going into next year. Even though you saw it was 2,300 students, that's still 2,300 students that had a major office referral this past year, is looking at core de-escalation and behavior management professional development for K-5 staff. This is something that really all of our elementary schools, especially with having so many new teachers, have noticed that is very, very needed. Cabarrus County has many professional educators that have been in the game for a long time, but we also, over the past year especially, have brought on a lot of new teachers. And you've got to have that behavior management before you can really get to instruction. So we've noticed teachers have classroom management, so they know, how to organize it. Every student has a number, where the pencils go. We got all that. But with behavior management, that is an area where not everybody knows what to do, because sometimes that root cause is an adult. And I hate to say that, but sometimes that's what happens, and the majority of the time, the adult doesn't realize it was them. They don't know. And so what we are really going to focus on going into next year is looking at and doing behavior management training. We actually had a meeting this morning with CNI to look at all of the professional development asks from our elementary schools to see, all right, what's the major things that we need? And so far, 15 schools have asked for Reconnect to Resilience training for next school year for their staff. And that's what they've identified as a need. Adding more de-escalation techniques and teaching them at strategic times throughout the year, and then behavior management professional learning for staff. And honestly, tailoring what staff need, tailoring what we make for what staff actually need. Not making an assumption, but using the data and making changes along the way. All right, so being proactive. So first up, Mr. Brian Doolin at Wolf Meadow is going to walk through some changes they had this last year.
All right, thank you, Dr. Parker, and good evening, Ms. Adcock, Mr. Welcher, Dr. Kapicki. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to be here this evening to present some strengths to you and then some areas of focus that we know that we need to ensure we're working on moving forward. So one of the big things that Dr. Parker mentioned is that every elementary school does have a PBIS system in place. That is positive behavioral interventions and supports. With that comes the major proactive piece that we have to have. She mentions as well, through COVID, we talked a lot about social emotional needs, a lot about learning loss, and I think through some of that, this behavioral piece slipped through the cracks just a bit. So we have to make sure that all of our staff are trained to be able to then teach our students how they should behave, what the expectations are for them as they come into school, knowing that some of them were absent during COVID, some of them have come to us not having a background in preschool and things of that nature. So last year at Wolf Meadow in October, November-ish, we noticed a trend that our numbers were elevated, minors, and majors. So our school improvement team meeting, that was an area of concern, so we brought that up. We did some troubleshooting, we did some thinking, and we decided that at Wolf Meadow, as in the past, Wolf Meadow have been recognized for many awards, 2015, 16, 17 with Green Ribbon Awards for PBIS, and a lot of that at Wolf Meadow and some other schools within the county as well had kind of trailed off a little bit. So we knew that we needed to bring that back to the forefront, because as educators, part of our educating students is teaching them the expectations that we have of them, but also then partnering with the parents to help them with those expectations at home as well. So we decided that we wanted to do a full reboot of PBIS. So as our school improvement team, we then moved that information to our goal teams. Goal teams just come from the school improvement plan that work on certain goals that are involved within there. So in the months of November and December, our goal teams worked on ways to reboot this, to kind of take it into a simpler form. The wording we had with our PBIS expectations before were very wordy, very lengthy. As a 5-year-old, you don't understand those things. So we wanted to make sure that the language within these expectations were very clear and relevant to them. So those goal teams worked and worked and worked, and then in January, we were able to reboot PBIS. So we had a kickoff that was a lot of fun. We called it a PBIS rally. It was to promote positive behavior. We started a new school-wide chant, which is WO, and then the students respond back LF. That's to get their attention or to let them know an important announcement's being made. We'll go over what WOLF stands for in just a few minutes. We did revise our PBIS matrices. Those are just a matrix of each location within the building that has what the expectations of behavior are. We created new posters to be presented throughout the school so that it's reminders everywhere they travel of those expectations. And then we also developed a PBIS reward system that has some extrinsic rewards, but also trying to move from some of those extrinsic rewards to what those intrinsic rewards to, which often is a positive phone call home to a parent or a family member, because that's what they really look forward to. So in January, we kicked that off. We had a Title I night, and during that Title I night event, we did go over the new school-wide matrix with all of our families. We provided all of them with this QR code, which if they were able to click on, they were able to go through and see the entire PBIS presentation. And so WOLF, it lended itself very well that we are Wolf Meadow. So W standing for wise choices, O offer respect, L leveled voices, and F follow directions. At other schools, they may focus on respect, being responsible, and being safe. So it just varies school to school, kind of what you can coin based off of your theme or the name or mascot of your school. So this was that parent communication piece, because as I said, parents are our biggest teammate in the education of their children. So we have to make sure that they understand what we're doing at school to teach those expectations to their students. That way, when we do have a concern that comes up, or we want to call them and praise their student, we know that they're that partner and they're going to be willing to go into this endeavor with us of making sure that we get as much positive behavior as possible. So our whole school matrix is posted in every classroom. It details what the hallway, classroom, cafeteria, playground, bus, and bathroom expectations are. So for each of those areas, there's a W, O, L, and F expectation for them to follow. So this was taught explicitly to the kids for several weeks. Our sole focus the first week of school this year, and possibly the first 2 weeks, depending on if a grade level needs that, is that we know that our students are not ready for content until they have that social, emotional, and behavioral piece in place. So it's going to be a lot of repetition, role-playing, modeling, letting them know why it's important that we have those positive behaviors in place before we can truly get into the chunk of what that learning is that needs to occur. So just to take you through a few of these, I will not read all of them to you, but in our hallways, in our classrooms, in our cafeteria, playground, bus, and bathrooms outside of the main bathrooms, all of these are there. We ask our staff members to refer to them throughout the day. When you're in the hallway, if your classroom is doing something well based off of this, you need to praise them for that. If there's something they're struggling with, you need to reiterate what is the positive behavior that they need to be demonstrating, not necessarily calling out the negative behavior, because sometimes that reinforces that negative behavior, but making sure that you are praising that positive behavior that is taking place. So just kind of to sum up, we need to make sure that as administrators, as teachers, that we are taking this proactive approach, because that is what we are charged with, is to be able to do that. Obviously, there are some reactive things that take place. Dr. Parker mentioned some of them. Ms. Baker will mention some of them as well, but we have to invest on the front end so that we can keep some of these negative things from happening. Obviously, there are going to be some reactive things that need to happen with behavior, but we have to teach in repetition, in very explicit terms, what behavior should look like in a positive form. So this is what Wolf Meadow rolled out last year. We had a lot of good feedback from it, from our staff members, from our families. Some of our families, when we would call with some praises of their students or some areas of difficulty, they would even refer back to it. We would say to them, I'm calling because they did not make a wise choice or follow directions. As you know, that's part of our PBIS plan. The parents were familiar with that language. So making sure that all stakeholders are involved and understand it, then I think that that's a way to turn that proactive into having to have less and less reactive approaches to behavior. Thank you. One more thing, positive office referral. So this kind of came with the positive. Sometimes we can catch ourselves calling and giving, your child did this that wasn't acceptable, or this or this. We have to make sure that for everything that they do that's not acceptable, there are way more things that are acceptable. So we started a wall of fame, and we started our positive office referrals. Many schools in the county do this, and so we created this template that the teachers could check whether it was the W, O, L, or F that student was engaging in positively. And Yes, they sometimes liked a lollipop if that was an option, or a eraser, but that phone call home to mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or big brother or big sister, that made way more impact than any extrinsic thing that we could ever give them. So we did make sure that that was something that children were working very hard toward, was having those positive phone calls made home to their families. All right, Ms. Baker.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Kapicki, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'll talk to you a little bit about some things that are unique to Cox Mill. I put together a snapshot for you of our end of the year data that looks at some of the things that Dr. Parker shared with you in terms of offenses, locations, subjects, and arrangements that are very specific, obviously, to Cox Mill. Last year, we had about 221 referrals that were major, seen by an administrator. And we had about 270 referrals that were of the minor offenses. Those are things that happened in the classroom. The teachers, for me at Cox Mill, anytime you have a minor offense where it's beyond a warning, and more often than not, it's beyond 1 or 2 warnings. It's probably a couple, where it's documented, and then there's always a communication home to families so that they're well informed of what's happening in the classroom, what steps the teacher took place, and where it didn't become a major office referral that was sent up to the front. The thing that is unique about this is our behavior had increased, almost doubled, from the 21-22 school year. And so that really let me and my administrative team be able to take a deep look through our SIT team to talk about what are some things that we need to do when we analyzed our behavior. And so it really, for us, fell into 2 buckets. One is under student wellness, and the other one is through the MTSS, but with a more focused lens on PBIS. And so since these committees pretty much work in tandem with each other, it was very important that we outlined very specific steps for what that looks like at Cox Mill. I know that this slide is very detailed, but I really wanted to try to capture the differences and the changes that would be happening for the 23-24 school year. So one thing that we're going to be putting into place is 3 times a year be looking at academic celebrations, but also be incorporating behavior celebrations, where we'll be recognizing students based on their leveled assessments, growth throughout the many different measures, but also using that as an opportunity to highlight students that may be exhibiting a character trait of the month through the Positivity Project, and also be reinforcing our 3 R's, which is respectful, responsible, and ready to learn. And so that would just kind of encompass all those things. That's very new for Cox Mill. We've never really done like a pep rally style, and so that would be something new coming in. We also are going to continue to teach and modeling expectations, just as my colleague Mr. Doolin explained, in the classroom. We're going to be creating a flow chart this year for classroom use, kind of first warning steps, consequences, or next steps that they can take before it leads to a major office referral. Continued professional development for de-escalating student behavior. You know that's probably a common theme here tonight. Looking at developing common language, that was one thing our team really identified, is what we identify as different types of behavior, using the same consistent language, so that way when I say disruptive behavior, it means the same to you and to the other teacher down the hall. And making sure that everything follows under respectful, responsible, and ready, and that you don't have some outliers there. So it's all under those 3 domains, and there's not really an other category. Of course, using P2 for morning meetings and classroom guidance lessons, and then continuation of tiered support for interventions. So that's kind of the PBIS portion of MTSS. And then the Student Wellness Committee this year will be a new goal team for Cox Mill. We've added in an encore through a half-time counselor position, where it allows for 1 semester K2 to receive some intervention, and then 3-5 the second semester. And it's fitness and mindfulness. I'll show you on the next slide a little bit what that looks like, because it's a little different. Our counselors this upcoming year have planned to be holding some informational parent sessions. We have great partners at Cox Mill, wonderful parents that support us, but we wanted to be able to help elaborate them, but also to empower them in knowing some of the dangers of social media. That was the #1 thing that our children were talking about last year was, oh, this was on Twitter, or they made a TikTok about it. And so we really want to caution parents, you know, the age for a TikTok account is 14, and not many parents know that. And almost every 5th grader has them, and There's not a 14-year-old in my building. So just those things. Alerting of the dangers of social media, but also how to support executive functioning at home, emotional regulation. What does that look like? We've moved our 2 counselors out of the Encore rotation, and that's primarily so they can serve in small group and individual sessions, meeting the social emotional needs of our students. And then really using that SRSSIE, and I know somebody will ask what the acronym is, but that's really a screen scale. We used to call it the BUS, but that's really looking at internal and external behaviors, and it puts it on a scale for you so you know for individual students how to kind of help integrate and mitigate to help them target specific small groups in areas of needs. We also are going to be working on anxiety, social skills, solving conflicts, family dynamics, those kinds of things in small groups. This is what our matrix looks like at Cox Mill. It follows very similar format as Wolf Meadow, so identifying how to be respectful, responsible, and ready in all the different places throughout the building and what exactly that looks like. Teachers spend the first couple weeks of school and even after long breaks or periods of time reviewing these and teaching, modeling for students. And then the fitness and mindfulness, that's on the left-hand side. That's the new Encore that will be coming in for K2 and 3-5, different periods of the time. So it's going to start with a mindful moment where students will learn breathing techniques, grounding practices, stretching, etc. It'll be a very small portion. They'll do the Guidance Essential Standard lesson that comes from the state of North Carolina, and then they'll finish it up with something our counselor calls Gratitude with Attitude, and that's where she'll incorporate some of those pieces into a fitness element. She primarily likes to use strength training, so a lot of it is like different yoga poses and moves, but that's just something that'll be different to Cox Mill. There are several other schools that embed some sort of this into their Encore rotation, so it's not new to the district, it's just newer to Cox Mill. This is one of the pieces that I wanted to highlight just because through P2 and through whenever we're looking at what students can be a part of, P2 really empowered our counselor team, but also our committee that works on this to really start some student leadership opportunities. And so one of them is our student council. They do projects throughout the school, but also the community. Next year, the goal is that they will meet with our administrative team quarterly to kind of talk about some of the projects that they would like to do on campus. This past year, every student was involved in Servants with a Heart, which is packaging meals for the homeless. They also did nursing home visits, and they did a couple other school beautification projects throughout the building. We had peer helpers, which works with our abilities and possibilities classrooms, and every student visits the abilities and possibilities classroom, and then from there they go in and help out Miss Lewinston with whatever she may need and try to help boost morale in those kids. This year we also had NCDPI team, and they work on leadership qualities, and so this past year they adopted Gap Africa, and they raised money to help provide clean water for them, and they did several different campaigns for them. And then you all probably remember the cereal drive that went, I think, viral because they collected like 3 times the amount of cereal than expected, and we had to have a very large truck to help move it. And so they provided cereal during the holiday break to many of our Title I schools throughout the district, several boxes. So really just looking at, it's less time to be preventative than reactive, and P2 has really helped our teachers to help empower our students to be very successful in many different platforms, and leadership is one of them.
All right, and just to wrap it up, originally the district discipline committee, which secondary went over this, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows elementary is a part of that too. The discipline committee started this past school year and has been a great place for us to norm, talk through scenarios, and it was originally created in response to being on DPI's warning list for disproportionality with EC students. Through the work of this committee and the work of these great people, and many people in this room are no longer on that list, yay. Professional learning for administrators about best practices with EC students, proper protocols to ensure administrators are reviewing behavior intervention plans and how those look, making sure there's consistency across the district. And this committee has, and we actually have a meeting later this week getting ready for next school year, has worked to expand district implementation of Educator's Handbook. So we worked through a lot of kinks this time last year, starting that was new for everybody, and norming on that. And then agenda items around vaping, which this is more for secondary, but in all honesty, we had our couple moments this year in upper elementary of some of those, or just having them, not using them, but having them, and had to work through that and how to best educate students. And then the CCS strategic plan includes PD for teachers around student wellness. And then in the future, so we are really a big focus, especially right now we're in like the heat of planning for going into next year, is professional learning focuses driven by school CNA, so comprehensive needs assessment, and school improvement plans. So what Wolf Meadow needs and what Cox Mill needs may not be the exact same thing. There may be parts of that are similar that we may offer as core support from the district, but then tailoring for what each school needs with professional development, not blanketing it, because we know every community doesn't need the same thing. Every teacher, every administrator doesn't need the same thing. And we're heading into our second year of P2 implementation. I'm excited to see how it looks in the second year, especially because teachers will be more familiar with how to use it, what it looks like. I'm excited to see where we go. And then we're also going to be doing a lot of coaching going into this next year. So the Get Better Faster sequence through multi-classroom leader positions that are in quite a few elementary schools. We'll have 14 across the district. And they will be doing a lot of coaching around classroom management first, and then instruction, because we've got to get the management right before we can get to that great instruction. And norming on a lot of that coaching across the district I think will also be very helpful, especially with so many new teachers. And that is all we have. Any questions?
Any questions, board members? Ms. Sandage?
I'm sorry to always be the one that asks questions.
Good.
Well, I'm not sorry, because it's important.
No, don't be sorry.
Okay, so I saw a slide. Am I echoing? Okay. I saw a slide that talked about, or that referred to hours. Is that hours away from instruction? What does that hours relate to?
So that is how Educator's Handbook qualifies the time that the discipline would take from instruction potentially. So when a student is OSS or out of school, if they're out of school the whole day, that's 8 hours of missed instruction. Does that make sense? So it's a way to quantify that.
So do we look at the hours that it takes away from just that student, or from the lesson plan for other students?
So the way Educator's Handbook tracks it is it's for that student. So it's tracking it for them. So what they've missed throughout the year from either being in ISS and in-school suspension, or being out OSS and out-of-school suspension.
Okay, that's helpful.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I don't know that we have to necessarily track if it takes away from other students, but that would be useful information to know.
Yep. Brian's gonna
Yeah, so just to add a little bit to that, so when those major office referrals come in, we have different ways that we go about them, but for the most part, we know that if it's major enough for a teacher to take the time to either, if they have time to enter it or to call the office and ask for support, then those students are removed from instruction, so there's as little disruption as possible. So for the majority of those majors, once those come in, we get emails, we get a text on our phone. Those are handled by an admin or a student success coach or MTSS coordinator. They're removed from the classroom so that they're having the least impact on others missing instruction.
So it looks like you guys were able to identify trends even though this was the first year, and then put things in place as a result of those trends. Did I see that correctly?
Yes. Yes,
okay.
There were quite a few changes that happened from the beginning of the year data dig. So I went back and was looking at slides from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, especially with our kindergarten friends. So it was, okay, this isn't working. We need to roll back and directly teach this skill with this group of students. Or looking with counselors, if there's students that out of a classroom where there's like 25% of students in a class are being referred for X. So it's not being able to regulate their emotions, let's say, and getting really upset when my pencil breaks, or getting really upset when my friend doesn't talk to me when I want them to, or whatever that reason is. And bringing interventions in where counselors would go in and work with that class in a soft start. It could be, a lot of schools have a elective course that they use to kind of flex and meet the needs. So it could be that the counselor pushes in and teaches it then, if the counselor's in the rotation. There's a lot of different places, but there was a lot this year of here's the data, here's how to look at it, and then honestly, when school teams could see that, the urgency for the change has really been there, and we were kind of pivoting and changing really all year to meet the needs of our kids.
Okay, two more things. I'm really glad that you guys were able to point out that parents make a huge impact on student behavior, and that kid just wants their parent to know that they did good that day. So thanks for pointing that out for us and the general public. The other thing is, and I want to make this question make sense, because when I think about, things that you'll hear like, your zip code determines the type of education you receive, I don't want us to mistake that for the differences that schools need. So this school in this area may have these different problems, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't getting the same level of education and, interaction from students. And I just wanted to clarify that out loud. While they may be different schools, they are experiencing different things, but that doesn't take away from what that child is getting at that school. Do I hear that correctly?
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
The language that we use around that a lot is the core support, so everybody will get the same core, and then depending on what the data is showing us and what the needs are at that school, they may get something else, if that makes sense. So
it does. I just wanted to make sure I clarify that. Thank you.
Mr. Treadaway?
I just wanted to point out, I want to thank Ms. Baker for pointing out, if you look at their incidents, the vast majority were non-instructional.
Yep.
And I think for folks that haven't worked in schools, they think it's always in the classroom, but it's usually the unstructured times that are, and that's where the school building can be a factor. Just the layout of the school building. Talk about differences. It's not just the size or the kids or whatever. Sometimes it's the actual facility can make a big difference.
Mr. Walton?
Yeah, I also thank you for the presentation. On the question about the 2,300 referrals, is that number of referrals or is that number of students?
That's number of students.
Number of
so
students.
I have the actual numbers of referrals. Do you want those?
No, what it was explained to me is there are some students that make a vast majority, a handful of students make the vast majority of these referrals.
Sometimes,
and that can skew some of your numbers.
Yes,
Does
it
it
is.
also break it down to the EC students as well, or is it?
We can, yes. I don't have that in front of me, but we do have that broken down so that administrators can all see that with an Educator's Handbook in Power School.
Yeah, I had the opportunity at the leadership event with Dr. Ward to visit a couple of schools, and we saw the time that they actually take to review the data, and the amount of data that's provided to the schools was really a lot. They can compare themselves against other schools, and are they above an average or below an average? And I think attendance was one of the things that was highlighted in one of the meetings we went to as well. So I do appreciate I think I really like the creativity that's going on there. Brian, are your posters, are they in different languages? How do you get those out to the parents that don't happen to be?
Yep, so we have them in English and Spanish. So everywhere that you see the hallway ones, the restroom ones, the classroom ones, there's English and Spanish in all of those.
That's obviously important to be able to communicate with those parents. And then I guess what is success? I mean, I know the SIT teams have goals, but what is success? Implementing these programs that we've outlined, is that a success, or are you looking for numbers to decline rapidly? Do we have a percentage that we're going?
Right. So through our Leadership Academy this year, we were deemed with making our school improvement plan goals, and so one of them centered around student wellness. So some of that could be the social emotional approach, some of that could be the behavioral approach. So as a school team, we chose to create a goal in which it reduces our majors by a certain number, but then also looking at our panorama survey, which is like what are the positive outcomes that students think of themselves, and then SSRSIE, which is when teachers look at internal and external situations that are arising that they think have a negative impact on kids. If we take those things, we want for 80% of our students per se, I'm just throwing a number out there, to at the end of the year report that they have had a positive school experience throughout the year. So we take data that we already have, and so yes, we want for these phone calls home to go through, we want for the students to be able to tell us what PBIS is and what WOLF stands for, and for parents to kind of help us with that common language. But we do want to use actual data and facts to drive those school improvement goals that we have. So that's what we worked on for 2 days with our school teams at the Leadership Academy, which several of you attended. Thank you for being there for that. But we did come out with those concrete goals and action steps based on how we want to reach those goals. So you're right, success can look several different ways, but we do want to be able to show on paper what has success looked like at each school.
I guess it's the same for you, Danielle. You got a lot of things you're trying to implement in 1 year. How do you know which one of those things is actually going to be the best, makes the most impact?
A lot of our data comes from what our students say and what teachers say. We're talking to kids every day, and P2 with the morning meeting platform has really opened just a door for communication, and a lot of times our students tell us exactly what they need, and then teachers take it back to committees, or they're popping in my door after school like, hey, guess what was shared today? And so it makes it really easy for us if we're listening to what kids have to say, and our teachers and our staff, they have a lot of the answers. So for me specifically at Cox Mill, a lot of our behavior, it doesn't happen often or significant, but all our teachers are equipped, and so they have a lot of the skill sets. But now we're at the need to have more development, professional development, to help them kind of de-escalate situations as they're arising quicker, to kind of know some of the triggers that our students are exhibiting before a behavior happens. And so that early intervention, even in the classroom, just preparing teachers and staff with that professional development to have the skills and the strategies would be huge, very advantageous for us.
Thanks for sharing.
Miss Lindsay.
So just wondering, these behavioral issues that we have with the kids in the elementary level, I heard you say that, you think maybe part of it had to do with COVID, because they're coming out of that, not being able to go to preschool and that kind of thing, which completely understand that. When you guys have a student at the elementary level that is one that happens to have these behaviors regularly, when you talk to the parents, what kind of responses are you getting?
Right, so, and just to kind of set the background for that question, great question. So obviously we do have those outliers that do take a considerable amount of the time. So we have processes in place through MTSS. We want to make sure that we go through interventions that we want to try to see if they work for them. The parent has to be a part of that conversation the entire time. I will say for me, thankfully, and for most of my colleagues, most of the response from parents is positive. They do want to help to do what's best for their students. Sometimes I think that maybe they exhibit some behaviors at home that they don't at school, and vice versa. So that may look and sound a little bit different to them, but we want to make sure that through those processes and through those tier meetings, sometimes through those tier meetings we decide that we may suspect a disability, and then we move in that way. Sometimes we say, let's try this intervention for 6 weeks. It didn't work. Let's try this one. And then for some reason, that intervention, the supports from that proved to be successful. So as we said, the parents have to be a part of that conversation all along the way, because they can add some things at home that they try that help. We can add some things at school that we try to help. So we have to have that partnership together. So for the most part, absolutely, our parents are that big puzzle piece there, and we have good feedback from them. Sometimes there are some crucial conversations that have to take place both ways. So we're always, ready to do that, and we welcome those conversations because we want to make sure that we can make those students successful as possible.
Yeah, I'm just curious, at what point, part of our job as a school system, obviously the main focus that we should have is educating these children, right? So it seems like over the last year, if not more than that, most of our focus has been strictly on behavioral issues, mental health of these kids and all of that. And so at what point, I guess my question is, at what point do we put this back on the parents to say, look, this is an issue for your child that is going to need to be addressed, and it's going to need to be addressed by the parents, and have them be able to reach out to a clinician and get mental health in that way?
Absolutely. So we have a lot of action steps in our plan this year. We want to have at our Title I nights, we want to have Triple P, which is positive parenting practices. Those are ways to get the parents involved if they need some supports at home. We have our CISP team that's always there to make recommendations for mental health services. But we have to own part of it, but we have to help to educate our parents on some of those behavior practices as well. So I think part of that is getting our parents into the schools, getting them involved, letting them know what's happening in there with their students and letting them see it from that lens. So I think, through COVID, we didn't have the ability to have a lot of parent involvement within the school. So I would say now that has kind of gone away considerably. Thank goodness we've had a lot more parents involved with those tiered processes and those behavior conferences. But you're right, there has to be an investment from both parties, from the school setting, but also from the parental setting as well. However, sometimes the parents don't have those resources to help support that, so then that's when we step in as administrators and as CISP teams to make sure that they have those supports and we can reach out to them and get them to those right services that they need. So you're right, there needs to be that fine balance there.
And one of the things, and this is crazy to even think about, but I saw on there was vaping. We don't, are we having a huge issue with vaping in the elementary schools too?
Not in elementary, no.
Okay.
Mostly, honestly, those very few calls this school year, I could count them on my fingers, were a child took it or had it in their bag. They weren't doing anything with it, but they saw someone at home had it, a sibling had it, somebody else had it, and so they thought it was cool and took it with them. So very, very small, but not anything like what we're seeing with our older kiddos.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Ms. Escobar?
So thank you both all three of you, but thank you for the principals for coming in, and sharing your practices. As a Cox Mill elementary parent, I'm very familiar with the 3 R's, so it's interesting to hear Wolf, and I like how you've broken it down. And I will say, as a parent, knowing what they're learning in school, I use it at home. I'm like, what are the 3 R's? Are we getting out the door? We got to be ready. Let's go. So actually, speaking to that, we're trying to increase our parent communication, and we have these new tools. And so how are we, because back in the day, when we would catch our kids being good, we had yellow sheets, we had little cards, and they would bring them home and we'd stick them on the fridge, and we were so proud. And then we got transitioned to Dojo. So for those who don't know, it's an app, and the teachers catch them being good in the class, anywhere in the school, and they keep it up on the board. So my kid's super competitive and is I'm number 2 in the class right now with the most Dojo points, all that kind of stuff. So does Dojo go away? And then with this, and then is there a way that our schools are using technology to communicate some of this stuff? And I will just say, for the calls home, I had a friend at work who is a parent at a different Cabarrus County school. She was on cloud 9 when she got that phone call. So I think it's great for the kids, but it's also really good for the parents. If you're struggling at home with behavior at home, and to know that they're rock stars at school, it's phenomenal. So I think that's how you build relationships. I appreciate the goals you have for next year. That sounds like a lot. Good luck with all that. But I would say having those parent meetings, having something, again, pre-COVID, we used to have that 3rd grade concert, and so we would all come to see our kids sing. Oh, and then they would sneak in all this other stuff that we were supposed to learn. Mm-hmm. So I want to increase that relationship. Now, back at the data, my question is, so if aggressive is not fighting, if that's something else, what is aggressive? Because I'm trying to understand the minor versus major. What does major look like in elementary?
Yeah, so obviously a distinction between, you saw that fighting was 3%. So fighting is when 2 students have engaged in physical motions toward each other. Aggressive could be pulling a seat out from underneath someone, pinching someone, throwing a pencil at that student. So in some way there's physical attempt to have contact with another student, but the other student has not reciprocated back with that. So it's really one person doing something to one other person or group of people without any reciprocation.
And does bullying fit into that? So if they don't actually physically touch, but yet they're insulting on a regular basis?
So bullying is a separate category, so that one didn't make it up to 3%, so that's a success story in seeing that bullying wasn't up to where some of the other ones were, because that is a totally separate referral that's put in there, different category.
Okay. Okay. And can you just answer how are you using how do you envision seeing this new technology helping you?
So the points, so what you're describing within Class Dojo, so that's not a part of Parent Square. So many schools that still use Class Dojo likely will still do that. Schools use points cards. They use a lot of different ways to measure the points. Some of them use bucks, lots of different tools for measuring those positive points. That is not a part of Parent Square. It feels like Parent Square literally has every other piece except the points. Maybe they'll have that within the next few years. But a majority of the schools, they all have a way where they're tracking that. Some schools use Dojo. Some schools do whole class points. Some schools do individual points. It depends. It's different depending on the school improvement plan at that school and PBI's plan.
Okay. Thank you.
I would just like to say thank you for what you're doing. It's really very intentional that you look at things that have not been utilized before and innovative ways to approach. I mean, some of these things you're saying you didn't have these issues and now you do. So I just want to say kudos to you guys for doing that. The other thing is you said set expectations, which I think is, I mean, kids need to know something like over and over, and setting that expectation and then having a parental informational session, because our parents do need to understand how their kids are acting socially with other children, which they might not be having at home. So I think this is how we make the biggest impact in our school system, is by teaching our youngest kids how to behave, and hopefully maybe they can grow up and then, you know, we'll see changes as they get to be adults. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I just have one question. So is school-based therapy offered for elementary schools like kindergarten? Are they able to receive? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, board members, we'll move to 6.02 and our update on transportation software with Mr. Art Whitaker. Welcome.
Well, members of the board, Dr. Kopicki, Madam Chair, thank you for having me tonight. I have a really quick presentation to give you on the update of our new transportation software. I told you back in May when we first launched this that I would be back, so I'm living up to my promise that I thought I'd come back and give you a really quick update. So we're just going to recap for just a moment. Why do we need a new transportation software system? Of course, we all know that our growth, we have increasing ADM, duplicate work. The school and transportation are doing duplicate work. Time, we need to be, of course, we never have enough time. We need to be more efficient with what we have. We have a lot of errors. We have to go back. Transmission, school information that we're getting sometimes is not correct, and we have to go back. So we have multiple parties that are involved in that. And then just better communication with our students and our parents in our schools. So as all of you know, we chose Where's My Bus app. It's the information that we're going to be pushing out to an app that we have purchased, and it will contain the bus information in regards to students so they can determine where the bus is and the on-time arrival for the bus. So just the parent portal smartphone app. If some of you might have already downloaded it, but it gives you the access to designated stop times and locations. You can see real-time information about the location of your child's bus, and you can receive notifications when the bus is getting close. Features of the app, once again, what this app can do, it can tell you or push notifications to you about your child's bus within a certain distance of their stop. It will show you where the bus is on its route, and it will give you a pickup and drop-off time of the locations of your child's stop. What it cannot do, and I need to really emphasize this, it cannot tell you whether or not your child is on the bus or not. It can and it can't tell you whether or not your child got off the bus, but it can tell you that the bus is in the area. The benefits are we have a parent can view that bus. We can get ETAs. We can control the messaging. The schools reduce call volume, better communication with our stakeholders, and reduce our paperwork. And our students receive less stress related to missing the bus and accessing transportation information on their phones. So once again, I'd like to remind everybody that our pilot schools were Hickory Ridge Elementary School and Wolf Meadows Elementary School. Our timeline, we rolled it out in April the 24th, and our full-scale goal implementation is for the 23-24 school year. So I will ask Mr. Doolin. He happens to be here tonight, so he wasn't a plant. He just happens to be here tonight presenting on another topic. But you know, the general pilot program, we saw about 700 registered users on it the last week of school. As soon as we sent the flyers home and everybody found out about it, we kind of went. We had a soft opening there, and we went to go live, and we had 1,600 registered users at the end of school. So we grew. We doubled our users. So some of the feedback, and I mean, we were. That's probably Mr. Doolin's quote, but I'll give Mr. Doolin the opportunity to tell you, since he was one of my pilot schools, how he dealt.
No, Art, that was just for the 2 pilot schools, right? You're talking about
Yes,
the
sir.
7%?
Yes, that was just for,
Okay.
excuse me. Let's see if I can get that back. Sorry about that. I tried to go back. Can you take me back to the, yeah, the pilot schools. There we go. The Hickory Ridge Elementary School and Mr. Doolin's Wolf Meadows. Those were our pilot schools. So 700 users across 2 schools registered, and then it jumped to 1,600 at the end of school.
So that's on the next slide, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Do they have to identify who they are? So these are parents?
Yeah, we actually, they are identified in our app. Yes, sir. So
there's
Mr. Doolin?
Yeah, so one of our parents' night was actually the same night that we did a little talking about our PBIS system as well. We rolled out Edulog. We had sign-ups there with our data manager who helps get a lot of information from PowerSchool into the system to make sure that it's all there. One of those is that security verification, making sure that when they register for it, that they are a verified person of who should receive that information for their child. It helped with communication considerably. Often as a parent, obviously, if your child hasn't been picked up and it's 6:44 and the timesheet said 6:35, well, they're 9 minutes late. Where are they? You know, that's very reasonable to think that. But we do tell our parents 10 to 15 minutes before and after that window. So with being able to have the accessibility to that, they're able to get onto that app. They're able to see that that bus is probably just right around the corner. They can set the zone to where when the bus is within 2 miles of there, that it will send them a notification. If it's a more densely populated area, they can narrow it down to several hundred feet so that when that bus goes down one street of the subdivision, it doesn't tell them that it's super close because they know that's going to have to go a couple more. So just that accessibility piece there. And what's really going to help is that when we do have sub buses, this year we kind of use the light version of it, so just certain features of it. So this year there will be more that will be used. We'll have the capability at some point for them to switch out those sub buses so that it can tell you that bus such and such is on this bus today, so you know which one you're looking for, and you can track in real time where that bus is and if it's running behind or early within that 10-minute window. So it has really helped our front office staff really enjoy it because they don't get all those phone calls asking where the bus is. So they just remind them that they have the ability to check, and then we had a lot more that then registered for the app because then they didn't have to take the time to call up to the school asking questions and then consulting the AP. So parents were able to see that it was very user-friendly.
Thank you, Mr. Doolin. So our next steps, we're going to be working with our communications department through the Parent Square as a communication tool for the app. We'll go ahead and launch that with their help. We're going to promote the app via our social media and our web pages, and we'll continue to provide the schools with the flyers and the signage. So that's about it. It was a quick, I do believe that we did have some success with some board members that actually tried to use the app at the very end of the at the end of the school year. So hopefully some of you were able to use the app and it was successful. So I'll entertain any questions you may have.
And this rolls out beginning of this school year?
Yes, sir.
All schools,
Yes,
correct?
yes, sir.
Thank you.
August 9th.
Miss Lindsay?
So yes, I was one of those people that got to use the app for my daughter, and even though it was a light version of what the app can do, it was fantastic. So easy to use, so easy to sign up for. It was so nice to be able to see when the bus was coming. It gave us time, and I can't wait to see what other features it has going for it. But it was very, very cool, and just I wish I had had this app a long time ago. That's all I can say.
we are behind the curve a little bit. A few other districts have this, but we realized that it was a necessity, and so we're trying to play catch up, and we're moving very quickly with it.
I love it. It's great.
Thank you.
Mr. Walter?
Yeah, I've been encouraging this for several years as well. So we're going to put it on how many buses? And
It's driven by users.
Okay.
So as long as you have a bus assignment, you're in there and you registered for the app, and it comes
so
off.
every one of our buses will have the.
Every one of them.
And how many bus riders did we have last year?
Close to 24,000, 25.
You have those parents that can handle this.
Yep.
30,000 plus parents on
if
this
you
app.
if you requested a bus and you have that app and you have a bus assignment, that your request will be in that app.
And it can handle the volume that
Yes,
we're going to expect if you're going to open
it. It has larger districts that are actually using it with that capacity. So yes, it has that capacity.
Okay. Outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you.
Miss Escobar?
Thank you. I'm excited about this too, so we can run down the street and we'll be accurate. I guess the question I have is access. Not everyone has a mobile phone, and I'm praying that it's as easy as you say it is, but on open house night, I think that's probably a really good time where you're going to be receiving the bus information, and you're also going to receive whatever numbers, because you need a student number, right? Like what's all the
So on your bus pass, we're still going to have that option of paper. However we're doing it right now. Of course, we would like to switch you to the app. That's the idea. But right now, we're going to start the year with paper because of the fact that there's a registration piece that's we're not familiar with right now. But we're going to start with the old way with the bus pass, and you'll have all that information in it. So there's 5 security credentials. If you have to have an email address, you have to know the PowerSchool number, you have to have a date of birth. And there's 2 others. I think there's a few others there. I'm not exactly sure what they are, but there's 5 criteria that you need to meet in order to be okayed. Your request comes through my office for an app usage. We verify that, and then we allow you to access the app or not. So we have the ability to track the users and see if we have people that are just maybe they put 1 digit, or they didn't get the birthday exactly right. We have that ability to call, such as Mr. Doolin, and we say, is this individual right, because they've tried to register for the app. So there's those security features that are there that are designed to prevent anybody from being able to track the bus.
Right, and I would just encourage you to have maybe partner with your assistant principals, your partners at the schools, because for them, it's going to make their life easier the more people are on it. So I would just say at open house night, at least at the elementary level, the way it used to be was you would stand in line to either get a car rider number or your bus number. And if you could have someone there who says, here's the app, you now just receive your bus number, you just got your kid's number, you basically, at that night, you would probably have everything you need to sign up for it.
Absolutely.
If your assistant principals are well versed in this, I think that'll get as many people on board as far as adoption.
We will make every effort to make sure that awesome. Information's out there.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, board members, we'll move to 7.01, and we did not have any guest speakers that signed up to speak tonight, so we will move to our action agenda. We'll start with 8.01, our policies for approval on first read, and Dr. Sandy Ward. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, board members. Ms. Fugel. Fugel. Well, welcome to your first meeting. So we have 6 policies up for first reading this evening. We have 2 policies that are substantial, and we have 4 that are technical edits. Okay. Let's go 7810, please. Mm-hmm. That's your touch screen.
No, they're not saved as a PDF. You got to open up the Word document.
All right, so 7810 talks about the evaluation of licensed employees. This particular policy did some modification in number 9. If you would turn to number 9. Scroll to number 9, please. Okay, so here we're talking about how evaluation data is going to be used for teacher retention, for RIFs, for demotions, for termination, right? And so I want to read for you the way that our committee felt like it was best to be presented for this evening. So if you want to follow along in number 9, it says evaluation data may be considered in making decisions, particularly decisions related to contract renewal, and you can look at all the policies there. Then it talks about evaluation data may also be relevant in making other employment decisions, including those related to reassignments, professional development, and those types of things. And so there was some wording differences there. What you didn't see here was will and may were a big sticking point with our committee. So when we say evaluation data will, it really kind of limits the person who's doing the evaluation, whether it's our assistant principals, district staff, to just using that data. When you use the word may, you get to use all other types of factors that will help you to make employment decisions. So we went with may. It gives school administrators and the board a lot more latitude. Okay, does that make sense? So we may use that data for those types of things. And if you scroll back up to number 1, our team felt like we wanted to clarify what exemplary performance is. And that means having a direct and positive impact on student performance. Right? We can say exemplary all day. She's very nice to kids. She smiles, right? She seems to know she might be smart. But we are looking for proof that a teacher, a TA, or someone is having a direct positive impact on our students. Do you have any questions on that? Any questions, board members? Okay. No questions? Right. And we had lots of discussion in our committee meetings. Okay, we're going to go to 7815. And let me preface that 7815 is the evaluation of non-certified staff members. So that would be our TAs, our bus drivers, and everyone else. And how do we rank their employment and their performance? So here, our team wanted to add right up in the front part, yes, right here, we added in a time limit on how often we would assess our non-certified employees. And so we added in at least annually. Now we do more than that, but it didn't have anything there before. And so we want to make sure that everyone knows that if you work for Cabarrus County Schools, you are going to be evaluated on your performance. So we wanted to at least codify it there and put a time specific clause in there. And if you scroll down, on number 5, it was the same as number 9 and the other. The whole will and may argument kind of came up in our committee, not argument, but debate. And so kind of the same thing. We may use evaluation data when making decisions for our non-certified employees. Any questions there? Giving everyone full latitude. Mr. Walter has a question.
It's not a question. I do appreciate there was a robust discussion at the committee level. My concern, however, was the part that as a board member, and these are board policies, that we're adding to these policies, say, hey, guess what? We can use your evaluation to make employment decisions. But there's nothing in there that says, hey, if you have an issue with the evaluation, or if you think somebody's done something unfairly, that there should be a reference to how do I appeal, or that even if there is an appeal, there should be an appeal. And I'm told that during the discussions there's an evaluation instrument that apparently lets folks add their own comments to it, but I don't see that as a board member, and I don't see that in policy.
Okay.
So my
Dr.
concern
Owens,
was
can you
that there
address
wasn't
that as to
anything,
how?
wasn't a blurb in the policy that says something about if you've got issues with the appeal.
I appreciate the question. Dr. Owens, can you address how people respond to that?
I can. So for licensed staff, the North Carolina Educator Evaluation System allows for a response to be written at the end of an evaluation that is uploaded and is included with the teacher or licensed staff member's evaluation, that allows them to give their side of the story. At an internal level, it's done a little differently for classified staff because there is no state system. We will be building out a system as we go through the next year, but the way it currently works is the classified staff member does have the right to write a statement that is included with their evaluation.
And with both systems and both ways of doing it, the administrator has to respond. So in the license, the NESA's portion of it, it gives you a button there, and it lets you know that there is something in this canister that must be responded to. So the administrator has to respond to whatever the staff member is saying is happening. I don't feel like I was judged fairly or any of that, so there has to be a rebuttal to that.
Yeah, so my point was, as a board, do we want to put anything in policy that references what that procedure is? That's it.
Right. Yeah. All right. Thank you. If we can go to 4130. And we're moving into our technical edits, which means for those who are viewing, they usually make edits to either the footnote, to one of the resources and things of that nature. So the body of the policy is fine as it's read, but they're just making some updates. So in 4130, we talked about discretionary admission, and this is when principals are able to bring in students either from another system or things of that nature, or they're allowing students to come in early, like an early entrance. And so the update there was strongly recommended in the cross references. So it just added, it took out the student and parent grievance policy, and it's looking like the behavior for transfer students and those in the domicile, all those things are now put in, and that was the modification that they were making there. So you would not grieve this, because you can't grieve whether or not a person can come to our school. That is done in another way with John Basilis and his team. Okay, so that was taken out. 4155 is the assignment to classes, and this is how principals are able to place students in classes. And it does give parents, which they very well should, some leeway on asking and requesting what kind of teacher they want and that type of thing, but it ultimately leaves that power with the school principal to make a good decision, because what the principal knows the staff in the school, and the parent knows their child, so you've got to find the person who can put it all together, and that would be
the principal making a good decision. So we are welcoming parent input. We want to know about the student. So that one is a required legal reference at the back. Let's see. So that was required. Yep. Barely changed it at all. The next one is 4334, 5035, 7345, which is the use of unmanned aircraft drones. And I think in the last couple of years we spent a lot of time talking about drones, and Mr. Walters recalls. I think that's his area of occupation. So he was around when we were doing a lot of this. So one of the updates here is a required legal reference, and then a footnote. Any questions there?
Yeah, the FAA modified its regulations. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
Changes the update to that update.
Thank you for that. Wouldn't have known. And our last one is actually going to be 5024. I think I made a typo there. The automated external defibrillator. There are some hyperlinks that were required there, and then an additional footnote there for that policy. Any questions on these policies?
Okay.
We are finished with our technical edits, so now we'll finish up with our 6 or 7 additional ones and any others that you guys would like to bring forward. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, board, since this is a work and business session, we will be voting on this. So I need a motion to approve the listed policies as presented on first read.
So moved.
Second.
I've got a motion by Ms. Escobar, a second by Ms. Lindsay. All those in favor of approving the policies as presented for first read, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, these policies are approved on first read. We'll move to 8.02, our alternative school accountability model. Ms. Sarah Reeves, welcome.
Accountability participation waiver with NCDPI. If we could click the presentation.
The first one or second?
The first one, please.
Can you turn your mic on?
There we go. Thank you. So as you can see here in the attachment, North Carolina Department of Education actually allows us to submit an alternative option for our 2 alternative schools of the PLC and opportunity schools around the accountability model. Can you select the second presentation now, please? And so, as you all may be aware, as we've shared earlier this year, our current school performance grades are actually dictated by an 80% proficiency or achievement and a 20% growth. This is something that the state is currently revisiting, and we have certainly shared our feedback around this. However, we are lucky that the North Carolina Department of Instruction does, in fact, allow us an alternative accountability model for our 2 alternative schools, which really allows us to showcase the school's proficiency and growth in a different manner. So, as I shared previously, the state actually provides us with 3 different options. We select option B, or asking to select option B, which would allow us the ability to opt out of the 80% proficiency, 20% growth, and actually include 20% student persistence, which is wonderful because this actually gives a more accurate portrayal of the success of the school, and this is related to the accountability measure. So with that being said, that concludes the presentation for this evening. Are there any questions?
Mr. Walter?
So it's the same as we did last year. So
Yes, sir.
You're continuing on.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Escobar?
How do you measure persistence?
That is an excellent question. So that's really the students that stay enrolled in the coursework throughout the course of the year. And so they actually look at it through a couple of different pieces, but specifically remaining enrolled in any North Carolina public school throughout the end of that academic school year is how they calculate the 20%.
Okay. No other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, board members, we will vote on this as well. I need a motion to approve the alternative school accountability model as presented.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Sandage, a second by Ms. Lindsay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that is approved. Thank you. We'll move to 8.03, Hickory Ridge High School turf field contract approval. Hello, Mr. Cone.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Dr. Kopicki, and members of the board. A couple weeks ago, you approved the use of the interlocal purchasing system cooperative contract purchasing agreement for the improvements to Hickory Ridge High School turf field and track improvements. Tonight, I'm happy to present to you the standard contracted agreement with GeoServices Southeast as presented in the amount of $1,310,535 for the turf field portion of this project. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have about this.
Mr. Walter?
I assume it's been reviewed by our attorney?
It has, yes, sir. Okay.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so board members, we will get a motion now to approve the contract for the turf field.
Second.
So I have a motion by Mr. Furr, a second by Mr. Walter. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, board members. Contract is approved. We'll move to 8.04, our soft choice annual contract for Microsoft Office 365 with Mr. Farmer. Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Dr. Kopicki, and members of the board. I'm filling in for Ben Allred tonight, who's out of town. Here seeking approval for the payment of the Soft Choice annual contract for Microsoft licensing. Soft Choice is on the state contract. This is the third year of this contract, and it is for Microsoft licensing, which is foundational to the functionality of almost all of our systems, from the ones you're familiar with, Teams, Office, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, Outlook, so your email, to behind the scenes stuff, the operating systems of all the servers, the user accounts through the Active Directory system, to the SQL databases that accountability uses for all the student data.
Mr. Walter?
Any changes, any differences in costs, or any services that they're adding?
No services added. If you look at the subtotal, it's identical to last year. There's about a $2 difference in taxes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, board members, I need a motion to approve the Soft Choice annual contract as presented.
So moved.
Okay, I have a motion by Ms. Lindsay, a second by Mr. Furr. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, contract is approved. Okay, thank you. We will now go into closed session to consult with an attorney and preserve this attorney-client privilege pursuant to General Statute 143-318-11A3, and to consider confidential personnel matters pursuant to General Statute 143-318-11A6. This will include discussion of any litigation cases, KMK, Quiones, and Beyonde. So I need a motion.
I'll make the motion as you stated it.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Walter, a second by Ms. Lindsay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, we are in closed session. Thank you to all our presenters.